I'm very happy now to welcome Shunali, Shroff, Nidhi, Dugar, Kundalia, and of course, Brigadier Samir, Bhattacharya for their session titled Debutantes Ball.
We have with us Brigadier Samir, Shunali, and myself, Nidhi, Dugar, Kundalia. And let me begin with introducing Shunali first, and she will introduce Brigadier's book, and Brigadier in turn will introduce my book. Shunali has written an account of motherhood while juggling a career, a husband, 2 children, and 2 dogs. Now, she has not only followed the principles of, she's basically followed 2 major principles while writing this book, and those are of lunacy and humor. The cold feet that I had for my own impending motherhood is have unfortunately turned into frozen feet. So, well, let's know more about her book. But before that, Shunali will be introducing Brigadier's book.
So, Brigadier Bhattacharya here, I had an opportunity to meet him about 10 days ago in Bombay. Malavika rang and she said, you know, you are going to be speaking to him about his book. I said, okay, what has he written? And she said, oh, don't let it sound too formidable, but he has written a 6-part series, a book called Nothing But. And, you know, it's a little about the Raj and the Indian Army, and she went on and on with that preamble. And I actually got cold feet too, because I said, how many pages is this book? She said, I think 537. I said, I have 10 days, and you want me to go through this book? She said, it's only the first volume, you don't have to read all 6, as though that was any consolation. So I met Brigadier to first discuss his book with him and then get a copy of the book. And I came back and I rang my mother on my way back, and I said, I haven't met a man like that in my life. And my own father's been from the army. So gentle, so unassuming, and then when you hear that it took him 10 years to research these books, he has an international publisher for each one of them, 4 years to write them. He has researched the book in libraries all over the world. He's had very successful innings in the Indian Army. He was with the J&K Rifles, and his eye for detail and his interest in history and the way he has combined it with fiction to produce this. I think this is the only work of its kind that has ever been done within and outside of the subcontinent. So it's a real privilege to be interacting with him. He had some very beautiful anecdotes to share when I met him, and I was hoping that he'll be able to recount some of them. So over to you to introduce Nidhi.
Well, with 2 pretty ladies next to me, I'm back to my young age now, at the age of 78. Thank you, both of you. Well, talking about Nidhi, her name itself is Treasure. And she has written some 11 chapters on a book. And that book, I must say, she's done a lot of research. A lot of things I didn't know about India. She has opened my eyes of what kind of professions people follow in this country and the difficulties that they go through. She has, of course, she's married, and I believe her husband chaperoned her. Is he here, Vivek? Is your husband here?
Yeah, he is.
Where are you, Vivek?
He'll be joining us in a minute or 2.
All right, okay. And they both went around the entire country and to villages and to Naxalbari areas. And I sometimes wondered as to how did she manage to get so much of details on a book. And I think it is a well-valuable book, and everybody should go through it because it tells a lot about India we don't know. She has written about tattooing in Jharkhand. She has written about a lot about the dentist in Baroda, and the dentist happened to be a Sardar. So and surprisingly, that dentist has given a lot of information on how he started his dentistry. So that reminds me of a Sardar joke. I'm sorry, no Sardars, even if they are there. You see, in the late early 60s, a lot of Sardars went to England, and they're looking for jobs. No difficult job to find. So one Sardar went. He was looking for jobs here. They couldn't get one. So one day he went to the zoo, and he entered the zoo, and the zookeeper saw him. He said, come here. He said, yes, you want a job? He said, yeah, I would love to do a job. what kind of a job is it? You see, the problem is, yesterday the chimpanzee ran out of the cage and we're looking for a chimpanzee. So he said, how can I be a chimpanzee like that? No, we'll make you look like a chimpanzee with a chimpanzee's dress. So he said, okay, what do I do? He said, no, just get into the cage and jump around. Children will come and give you peanuts. You'll be happy. I'll give you some money. Oh, very happy. So he went and got himself and got into this. And he started jumping. I jumped a bit too high and he landed on the next cage. And there was this big tiger. He came. Vroom, vroom. So look at it was so hard that the poor chimpanzee's dress came off. And the tiger said, "Arey Sardar, tusi bhi Ludhiana de ho?" Right. So this particular Sardar in her book, I must say, is very frank about what he says. And he also tells how much he makes on that dentistry. Then there's another very interesting thing about crying, the Rudalis of Rajasthan. And I must say that she has put so much of pain in her book that it is readable. And I must say the person like none other than, what's the name of the film Padma Shri? What's the name? No, the gentleman who written something about your book, who's the Padma Shri. Guldar. A great man like Guldar has written about the book. And he said it opened my eyes and took me back generations. So I wish you all the luck, Nidhi, and do well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brigadier. So let's begin with speaking about Shunali's very charming book. So Shunali, why don't we begin with the basics? What brought about this book? Was it supposed to be a red alert for the mothers to be?
You know what happened? I used to keep a blog, and I used to write a lot about travel, but there were good bits about my experiences as a mother and as a wife, and I'm bewildered on both fronts. And when I wouldn't write about that, followers of my blog would say, can you write something about the husband? Because I refer to my husband as the husband. Very often he would read my blog and not speak to me for days because I had poked fun at him. And then I'd refer to my kids by their initials. And so I was approached by a publisher saying that, let's look at doing a book, serialized account of your take on parenting. Now, I never imagined my first book would be about parenting because it sounds a bit blah. But since she said, it's a new age, the way we are raising kids today is nothing like how our parents did it. The parameters of how you gauge good parenting have changed, for one. We got whacked around. Our parents scrimped at us. They thought nothing of self-esteem issues. And I think we turned out just fine. These days, it's applied science. And there are all these books to make you feel really inadequate, that you're not good enough and you have to work really hard. And on Facebook, there's this chain that goes, if your child lies a lot, it's because you question him too much. If your child bites his nails, it's because you reprimand him too much. So basically, everything that can go wrong with a child, the mother has to. In India, mothers are more hands-on anyway. Has to own up and say, yeah, I goofed up. So I realized that parenting isn't all that it's made out to be, and it's okay to make mistakes. And I'm just going to serialize my own account of it, and that's how it went. Yeah. So I didn't set out with any intention. It was just that these are my mommy diaries,
Lovely, that makes sense. What about you, Brigadier?
I want to speak about my book or speak about her?
No, your book.
All right. So, all right. Now how I got started my book, I'll tell you. You see, after I retired in 93 January, for a few days, you can say, was on a job. Then the State Bank of India took me on as an advisor, gave me 4 years there, and then gave me 7 years. I worked with the Italian company, and there was no work to do. The bank said, okay, you can go anywhere you feel like, just see our security is safe. So I had the opportunity to tour around India, and I went to all the libraries I could. Now, I took on to writing this book not with the aim of becoming a literary figure or to make money. I started writing this book to say what is the real truth about history. History can never be distorted, but we have this habit of distorting history for our own personal reasons. So when I started writing the book, I said, let me write about 8 families whom I've created, and they're from different religions, and their 5 generations are telling the story. One a Muslim, one a Kashmiri, one an Anglo-Indian, one a British officer, one a Bengali Muslim, one a Bengali Hindu, one a Sikh, because these are the guys who suffered when it came to partition. So my book is basically telling the truth, and I divide it into 6 parts, giving a particular part of each book as a moment of history. My book starts in the 1890s, and when Lord Curzon first came to India, not as Lord, but he came as an ordinary man. He had just lost his elections in Southport, but he was touring the world, and he came to India specially to go to Kashmir. I belong to a regiment called the Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, and Jammu and Kashmir has been a bone of contention right from the British days, because by that time in the 1870s, 60s, the Russians were coming into Central Asia, and they were knocking at the doors of Afghanistan. And there used to be a lot of these people coming from Russia those days and making a mark, coming into the Pamir. And we used to send our own expeditions over there like young husband to find out what they were doing there. So there was always a tussle of this particular region, because Kashmir is a very strategic area for us. So with that focus and background, what Kashmir has done on all these years, it's a story about the Indian subcontinent in particular and the world in general. And it goes into a lot of things which I didn't know when I was a schoolboy, because I was brought up in a Jesuit school. And what the fathers taught me, I knew about only those British history. Then I found that there were a lot of characters whom we didn't know about. So I asked somebody, have you ever heard of Chapekar brothers? He said, who are they? I said, Chapekar brothers were in the early 1900s. They were followers of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. And they were very motivated by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and they became revolutionaries. So in the late 1890s, when Pune, I belonged to Pune, when there was huge plague in that part of the area, and Queen Victoria was celebrating her 60th anniversary. So the Commissioner of Pune, Mr. Ryan, was throwing a big party, and there were lights and such things, but people were dying on the streets. So these 3 brothers got very upset with it, and let's shoot this bugger off. So they went and killed him, and all the 3 brothers were sent to Andamans and hanged. Now very few people know about Chapekar brothers. Similarly, very few people know about a guy called Saraba. Saraba was a Sikh from Ludhiana, who was a revolutionary. And in 1914-15, he would have done another 1857 had he lived. But then such people unfortunately are forgotten. Then there are a lot of things about Indian army which we don't know. For instance, in 1897, there were 21 Sikh soldiers who fought for the British in a Sikh regiment, and they took on 5,000 of these Afghans. And all 21 died fighting, literally fighting to the last round and last man. So much so that Queen Victoria decorated them then with the Indian Order of Merit First Class, which means was equivalent to a Victoria Cross. Because Indian Army never got Victoria Cross, only came to us in the First World War. We were never given Victoria Crosses, but Indian Army Order of Merit First Class was met like a Victoria Cross. Now there were 21 of these Sikhs who died over there, and it's a world record. Nobody has matched. The 21 Sikhs have fought for the empire, and they got 21 Victoria Crosses equivalent. Nobody else has ever done anywhere. So there's a lot about Indian Army which I've written in the book. And the book then goes into taking a love story between a Muslim officer and a Bengali Hindu girl. And therefore the book is divided into 6 parts, each part covering a portion of history. And the rest of it I'll leave it to Shunali to talk about. Yeah. I have a question for her, for Nidhi, about her book. Well, you've covered a lot about this tattoo business, and it can be very, 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 very painful to the person. Did you actually see one being done?
Let me begin with about the reason I decided to write this book. So I have spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and this was back in our ancestral home in Hyderabad. And my parents, most of them, left me behind with them, and they went on their own travels and their charades. So there's this particular corner in my grandmother's storeroom which had a beautiful Godrej almirah. I'm sure most of you in the audience must have had a beautiful Godrej Almirah back then. So the moment she would open that Almirah, it would open very hesitantly, but it would still like grouchily open, and then all beautiful things would tumble out. Sometimes there was this ball of gold and silver zari, which had been snipped off her ghagra's edges to be melted and to be converted into gold and silver. Then there was a box of ittars, which were so strong smelling that the moment you would open them, they just go up to your nose and tickle you, and you had to snuff it out to ensure that the smell did not remain. And then there was this little iron instrument. It was a very small ice cream scooper sort of a thing. And I asked my grandmom every time she took it out, what is this? And she would put her glasses on her nose and look at it and examine it from a distance and say, I don't know what this was, but I cleaned your father's ears with it. So among all these objects were also some beautiful black and white pictures. And using these black and white pictures, my grandmom told a lot of stories of her youth, of her childhood, of my father's childhood. She told me about the lamppost lighters. So it's only now that we have, lampposts which have been operated by electricity. But back then they were operated by gas. And it was the job of a lamppost lighter to come and light them in the evenings and then to put them off at the dawn next morning. And then there was the bishti wala, popularly known as the pani wala. He carried a big water skin bag, an animal skin bag, which was made of goat skin and camel skin sometimes, and he supplied water to the homes of people to the homes where government pipelines hadn't reached then. So among all these professions and among all these people, this was an everyday life pretty much back then. And much after the Godrej Almirah was sold and its contents distributed among us grandchildren, I moved to Calcutta, and I moved there after my marriage to Vivek. And the thing with Hyderabad, it is a beautiful city, it's a new city, it has big roads, it has brand new skyscrapers, but there's a cosmetic layer between the old life and the new life. You hardly get to witness what was in the past. Whereas Calcutta was almost a culture shock to me, because there was so much of old life between these new skyscrapers, amongst new homes. There was a bishti wala, there was still a nittar wala, there was a tattoo artist, there was a tobacco seller, and I realized that fragments of my grandmother's India still exist, and it was important to document it before it was relegated to obscurity. So when it comes to answering your question about the tattoo artist was when we went to Jharkhand, and that itself was quite an adventure, because when we were on the way, the Naxalites stopped us, and they asked us to pop out of the car, and when they knew that I was a journalist and I was writing a book, they got pretty excited, and they decided to make a meal for us. They roasted an entire lamb, an entire goat, until they realized I'm a vegetarian. So this was, then they sort of guided us to this little hamlet where the tattoo was being engraved on the hand of a young girl child. And this tattoo was quite compulsory, and when he was engraving it, there were droplets of blood which were forming, and the child was screaming in pain. And then there was someone who told her that you'd go to hell if you get the tattoo, if you do not get the tattoo done. No, you need to have the willpower and the strength, and you need to withhold it all. You need to withhold all the pain, to undergo the tattoo. Otherwise, you will definitely be directed to hell. So, So this the entire process of the tattoo making, and the fact that only girl child have to be tattooed, and not the little boys, and the fact that only the tattoos are done because so that these girls can be recognized in heaven by their ancestors. But it's odd that the men do not have to be recognized in heaven. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
Thank you very much. And talking about this tattoo business, what she brought in the book out, I felt, I never knew this. That thing can be done to girls like this, and the boys are being left out, and the boys should get it more.
True that. So Shunali, talking about your book, you have put in so much of your personal life in this book. You've spoken about your husband. You have given away a lot of your stories about your children, your two daughters, Zara and Rania. So, what do you think? Do you see a few years down the line, would they be okay with giving away so many of their stories from their childhood?
So I've been asked this question before at some other literary events, and here's what I have to say. I think when you're a writer, and as you will know and Brigadier will agree, you don't actually worry too much about what people will say and how they will react to, because anyway, if you're a non-fiction writer, you will offend somebody sooner or later. And I actually compared a lot of my own upbringing in our childhood, the values, the way we lived, to the way we are living now. And I knew, in one chapter I've compared my mother to, I've called her Führer, because she was like Hitler. And I knew that when she reads, she might be really offended. And I've written in one chapter that, my father was scared of my mother. And so even though I have, said it all in a light vein, people who want to know that I'm saying something will get it anyway. So yes, there is that risk. But if you worry so much, you'll never really end up writing anything. Having said that, I was asked that I should work on a sequel to this, and I said no, because my older one will be a teenager now, and there's only this much I want to put out there of their lives. So even in my blogs and my other writing, I've toned down a lot of stuff. So this was fun, but and if they, right now my kids are only too flattered that there's a book about them. And at some point they will have issues with it, but you know what? There's therapy for that.
Great, lovely.
So now about your book, Brigadier. Writing 6 books at once is no mean feat, nor is tracing the factual history of India since 1890. And when I was going through the chapters of your book, so you've covered between starting from Kashmir and how Jinnah used subversive tactics to, take away a large part of Kashmir from the Maharaja, to when, Nehru found out and he chucks that paperweight at the then army chief, I think. Yeah, one of the generals, yeah. And then, of course, you move on, you cover Bofors, you've covered the Kargil War, Jayavardhane's attempted assassination. It is so much detail. The whole canvas of your book is so wide. How did you figure out how wide to cast your net in terms of the detail that you have gone into? And how did you have the courage and the patience to do it for 10, 14 years?
Well, firstly, thank you. Okay. Well, when I got commissioned into the Indian Army in '59, my first posting was at a place called Kandalwan. And that area is snowbound most of the time over there, and it was about 30,000 feet. And my book starts from the place where I started my life, Kundalia. Then I spent most of my time in the borders, mostly in Kashmir. I belong to Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, and I commanded the center. And then I found that besides writing about the army, I must write about history, how it affected the army. Because after all, politics has a lot of part to play when it comes to fighting, and without the politicians giving me the okay, you can't fight, you don't go for a war. So in Kashmir in '47, what happened when I did the research over there, I found a lot of discrepancy what the government was saying, what we had in archives, and what the Maharaja had to say. But the fact came out to me that the Maharaja dilly-dallied giving her accession to India. We got independence on the 15th of August, '47. On the 3rd of June, Mountbatten had called all the princes, had a big, seminar with them, conference, and he said very plainly, listen, whichever country you want to go to is up to you. The choice is yours. Now, most of the people who are mostly Hindu population, they opted for India. But this Maharaja, being a Hindu, but had more Muslims over there, he was dilly-dallying. And right till October 22nd, till the raiders came, and he couldn't make up his mind whether to go to Pakistan or to India. Jinnah was very clever. He knew that it should come to India, and logically it should have gone to Pakistan actually. It will go to India, he thought, because they might influence the Maharaja. So Jinnah decided to use the INA officers who had been discharged after being court-martialed as the front for them, and they tamed these Afghans, Kabylis from the northwest frontier, and they came in and attacked. Now in my regiment those days, it was Maharaja's regiment, Jammu and Kashmir State Forces, there were Muslim officers and Muslim troops also. Now they, in a way, sort of induced into the Muslims of the Maharaja's army that you should do mutiny, and they mutinied on the border, and they joined the Pakistani Kabylis. Now, it's only when the Maharaja knew that he couldn't stop them coming into Srinagar that he got panicky and asked for help. But the help was also dependent on Mountbatten said, okay, we'll send the Indian army, but no British officer will go. No British officer will fight for you, although we were still being commanded by the British at that time. So you can go and fight yourself with the Pakistanis. Then what happened was, unfortunately, Mr. Pandit Nehru, because of world pressure maybe, while we were winning, we would have chucked them out, all of them out from there, we would have got the whole Kashmir back. He decided to go to the UN and go in for plebiscite. But the plebiscite was on condition that yes, first Pakistan must withdraw all the army that is inside and go back, and then only we'll have the plebiscite. And we were very sure that if the army goes back, because the kind of atrocities the Pakistanis did against the Muslims over there, the Muslims will vote for India because Sheikh Abdullah was a big figure those days. But unfortunately what happened was Pakistanis decided not to go back, and it became a stalemate, so we didn't move our army out either, and it then became known as the ceasefire line. So a lot of this historical fact I put in my book so that the reader can understand as to why it happened and what has been the consequence of so many years of being in J&K. So that was why I brought in this thing. Thank you very much. Nidhi, I'm going to ask you this question about writers. Okay. You have this character in your book who used to write in front of the GPO in Bombay. Yeah. That is dying now because you have telephones and you have these mobile phones and what are you trying to do SMS. But tell me, one interesting part of the book was that one Muslim lady went to there and said, "हमारे लिए कैसा divorce होगा लिखो." That's correct. Now, what did he write on that? The lady wanted a divorce. She couldn't write properly. She said, "I want to get a divorce. Please write a letter to my husband." I wonder what could he have written in that letter.
The letter writer was a professional that I came across in Mumbai. He was sitting outside the GPO of Mumbai Post Office, that is. Now, until a few years back, it was a licensed profession, and all the illiterates who could not write letters back home sought his help in writing letters, and he sat outside the Mumbai GPO, and a lot of people, the laborers, the migrants, a lot of women from the red light area, a lot of them came to him to get letters written to back home. And often these letters had truths, they had some lies, they had, because the red light area women could not really tell the truth back home about the way they had earned the money, nor could a lot of laborers talk about the kind of jobs they did, the odd jobs at buildings, and so it was a letter writer's job to make the letter sound fancy, to make the letter sound glamorous, and to make it to present to present the sender of the letter in the best light possible. Now, one of the odd customer that he came across was a lady who was clad in a burqa, and this was, I think, back in the 60s or the 70s. And now her husband had not returned home for a few years. He was living with another woman, and the lady in the burqa wanted a divorce. She wanted a divorce from her husband, and in Muslims you can get a divorce done over phone, over letters, or over email as well now. So, but back then she wanted a divorce on the letter. And the letter writer, although it wasn't his job, he took her aside and he counseled her. And it took him a couple of days. It took him a couple of letters which they wrote and which they chucked away before he could actually write a wonderful letter to the husband in which he spoke about the anguish that the woman was facing back home. And in fact, instead of asking for a talaq, the husband actually ended up coming back. So the letter writer as a profession had a lot of responsibility on hand to handle these little cases in a very delicate manner. He also had there were times when he had to write letters to both. There's one man who was asking him to write a letter to both his lover as well as his wife. So most of the times the letter to the wife was brief with instructions on how to spend the money. And the letters to the mistresses, meanwhile, were long. And the letter writers was pushed to write down some lines of Hemant Kumar in the letter. So he had quite a few anecdotal stories to tell us. And then I think it's unfortunate that the profession is on the brink of extinction, and the letter writer's license has been cancelled by the Mumbai GPO, and now they sit right outside the GPO doing odd jobs like packing couriers or wrapping parcels. So Shunali, a question for you. In a way, your children and your husband, you had to give a thriving career. Shunali was a she had a very successful PR company before writing this book. So she had to give away all of that to become a mother. But in a way, your children were also an inspiration to write this book. Did you in some way feel that this was perhaps unfortunate in your circumstances, that you had to give up a thriving career at the same time, gain a literary recognition?
At that time I used to be a journalist for several years, and as it happens, sometimes you cross over while you're doing an interview and you get hired, and I was working with Star TV, and then I had my own PR firm. And I have to say that when I had a partner, and we were very successful, and we were dealing with a lot of clients from Bollywood. You had Channel V, we had Sony Music, and my life was, I was really busy at that time, and it was very exciting. IFA Awards was my client. I'd travel with them for the, wherever they went out of town, out of the country and stuff. What happened when I realized I was going to be a mom, because I had clearly no confidence in my parenting skills, nor a maternal instinct, which was actually extinct probably, Freudian slip. I figured that, I have to do this very properly, and I'm in a burnout job, and my husband's really busy, and I can afford to take it easy for a bit and be there for my children. But along the way, what happened, when I gave it up, it was amazing to not have to work at all and get to work in the morning and deal with clients, and I could do yoga every day, and I could do meditation, and I could watch movies, and I could watch Sex and the City in the afternoon, and it almost felt wrong, because I had always been working and never really lived my life. I kept feeling, it felt like adultery, that something's not right, I'm doing all these things, I'm having too much fun. Indulging too much. And so at first it was amazing, but along the way I realized every time I went outside of my home and I went to a social gathering, and I ran into people. I remember running into Karan Johar at some event, and I had worked with him briefly, and now I had nothing to say to anybody. They would just ask me, how are you, how are the kids, and that's it.
You're losing your identity.
So I realized I had lost my identity, and I had nothing to contribute to anything anymore, but I was so overwhelmed with my feelings as a mother and the experiences of watching every minute of my child unfold in front of my eyes that it didn't matter, okay? It didn't matter at all. I think it's the progesterone does that, or some one of those hormones do this rubbish to you. So I went on being this crazy obsessive mother, which is there in the book. But now, so when I got back to writing, and then the book happened. But today, as things stand, I realize that as much as I gave of myself to my kids, I shouldn't have completely stopped working. Um, because I've lost those very important years of my life, though at that time it seemed like a good decision because I will never see my kids grow up the same way again, you know. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a barter kind of a thing that you do, and then you make your peace with it. So I have a lot of friends who never gave up working, though they had the option of doing that. And they tell me that you're really fortunate because your kids will never be the same age again, and you've enjoyed every part of their... and of course, your financial freedom goes away. I wasn't used to somebody else paying my credit card bills, even though my husband could well afford to, but I was always his working girl and very proud and paying my own EMIs for my car and everything. And I'm an army girl, that's how we are raised. And suddenly, it was like every time my credit card statement would come, my husband would call from the office and saying, "What are you buying so much?" And I hated that because I was never made to be answerable to anybody before that. And so one day I said, you know, it really bothers me that you ask me these questions and I can't just go and swipe my card the way it suits me. So he said, okay, I won't ask you. Then the credit card company started this thing where the person who pays the bill gets a little text message on their phone. So I'd get a message from him in the evening saying, so, how was shopping at Zara today? And I'd say, no, this is not done because I'm still feeling answerable to you. So I think women, and this is something I've realized now, after I turned 40, that when we give up our career and our financial freedom, we also give up our power. We do. You stop being that equal, whether somebody acknowledges it or states it or not, but in your own head, you're not equal anymore. You can, cry hoarse about feminism and equal rights or whatever, but you are not, because tomorrow if you want to put your husband in his place, God forbid, or you want to make a point of it, you have to still tell him, darling, can I have some money? And not that writing is a rewarding profession when it comes to money.
Just about to comment on that.
But the thing it did for me was that when I got back to writing full swing, and I started actually only with my blog, and then it got ranked in some top 10 Indian blogs, you should follow, blah, 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 all small recognitions, not monetized at all. I realized that he was speaking to me differently again. I could see that, the certain degree of respect has been reclaimed and restored. So to that extent, I think I've been compensated.
Lovely, lovely. Glad to hear that.
So speaking of anecdotes and speaking of letter writing, there is that letter that Sarojini Naidu wrote for the soldier in the hospital in England. It was such a moving thing, and the reply he gave about why the king had visited him. Could you please elaborate on that and share that anecdote with the audience?
Okay, before I share an anecdote talking about ATM, anytime money, right? When I got my pension, I had 819 rupees, but I got married to a lady who could earn, so now I call her ATM. My lady sitting over here, so she's my ATM, okay? Anytime money, right? Now coming back to what happened in the First World War, you see we had a lot of Indians who fought in Flanders and in France, and when they got injured or something, they were sent to hospitals in England. So there was this hospital in England at Brighton, which was actually an old palace of the king, which was converted to an Indian hospital. And all the soldiers, whether they were Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs, they all had separate compartments. They all lived together, but ate separate kind of food. And they were visited by most of our ex-politicians. Even Mahatma Gandhi's wife, Kasturba Gandhi, was there. Sarojini Naidu was there with them. Kasturba Gandhi used to clean the utensils of those who were maimed, because after eating, somebody had to clean the utensils. So she used to clean their utensils. Sarojini Naidu was a literate. She was very good in English, and there were a lot of people who couldn't write anything, either in Urdu or in Hindi, but they were soldiers. So she used to write letters for them over there. And that was the so-called looking after that the British also did with them in the Indian army over there. And in fact, when the king visited a particular person who had a Victoria Cross over there in the hospital with his family, right? And a person was introduced, there was a Jamadar who was introduced, and the CEO got very worried. He said, why are you troubling the king? So the Subedar Sahib said, if I can come from my own country and fight for you, I'm sure the king wouldn't mind giving me a little signature on my notebook and get named in that process. So these sort of things we didn't know. So until I picked up historical facts from India House and so on and so forth, And I put it in my book. I said, people must read what the Indian Army did, what the British did for us, or the Indian Army. And it became a sort of an anecdote. Another anecdote which I think I should talk about Queen Victoria. When she, 50 years of her reign, she decided to call some of the officers, British officers from there, to celebrate the 50 years of reign. And she told them, get one Indian officer with you. Indian officers those days were not second lieutenants and majors. They were Subedar, General, Subedar Major. They were JCOs. So this Pathan JCO, Subedar Major was brought along. And Queen Victoria invited them both for tea, high tea at the Buckingham Palace. So there was this CEO of the unit, the Englishman with the Subedar Major. The Subedar Major that day decided to go in his Pathani dress because that he found that we were not in the uniform. And the CEO went in the uniform with a sword. It was open to come in the whatever dress you feel like, so he went in a Pathani dress. And somebody told him, listen, when you get introduced to Her Highness, you have to give some other, you have to give her some gift. Now he looked into his pocket, and all he had was a couple of pennies and the CEO's hotel suite keys. He didn't know what to do till he was introduced. So when he was introduced, he simply sat down on his knees and bent down his head and kept touching Queen Victoria's knees like this. And he was saying something. Now Queen Victoria got very embarrassed. She asked the CEO who was standing at the door, what's he saying? The CEO was very nice. He said, madam, actually what the guy was saying, I'm sorry, I haven't got anything for you. So what the CEO said, no, madam, what he's saying is that for the sake of the British Empire, he's willing to give his head. Because they laid head down for him. That's what he said. And you won't believe me, after that, Queen Victoria had 2 Indians in Buckingham Palace as her own sevadars to serve her. And that's a fact. And one was from Agra, these 2 guys. And one became so influential with her that he became more or less like a munsif, a clerk. And there was a rumor that she was having an affair with this Muslim guy. Till her son chucked him out when he became king. That's another story about, a rumor I put in my book. Now coming back to her, you talked about a book about about Rudali. Now, are they hired, paid for, or, in old days you used to have a thing called a town crier. Whenever you went to town and you had to make an announcement, there was a town crier to announce. Like in the courts, you see the announcement before the judge comes in, whatever it is. Now, what exactly are they supposed to do, these Rudalis?
So the Rudalis come from a region where I come from, and they belong to the western part of India, Gujarat, Rajasthan, parts of Punjab as well. Now Rudali is basically a professional mourner. Now what her job was, because upper caste women could not mourn in front of commoners. It was sort of degrading the image to wail and cry when their husbands died. So what the Rudalis did was come in for them and cry instead. So they often beat their chest, slap the ground in front of them, wail loudly. They also carried a small bottle of a liqueur known as arc. And when the tears wouldn't form and the tears were not natural, they would quickly dab their eyes with it and then start crying again. So, but also an unknown aspect about Rudali is the fact that these Rudalis often doubled up as mistresses of upper caste men. So, the village that I visited in Rajasthan, let me give you a brief background about that. The village I visited in Rajasthan, which I have not mentioned in the book, because I'll be probably blowing on my whistleblower then. And that's the reason I'm not allowed to mention the name of that village. But that particular village when we visited, there were boys playing outside with ball. There were men who were doing their odd chores. There were women who were filling their pots at the well. But there was not a single girl anywhere in that village. And it struck me, but then I never bothered questioning anyone about it. And then when we were driving back from the village, my taxi driver told me that from this particular village, there's not been a single marriage for the past 80 years. And that's because there's been no girl in this village for the past 80 years. That is the rate of female infanticide and female feticide in this part of the country. So because there are no women here, because the dowry rates are so high, the families rather kill them. And the village is pretty much governed by this patriarchal figure known as the Thakur. There is no sign of police, there's no sign of government, there are barely any schools. There's one school which is attended by 32 children, and that's about it. So that's a sort of, the conditions in which these villages live. So these Thakurs also often have mistresses who work as Rudalis. These mistresses, their major job is to, bring pleasure to the life of the Thakur. And if they happen to produce children, they're quickly done at home, they're not taken to the hospitals. And if the children are boys, then these boys are used as, helps at home. What they popularly call the, chelas. In that part of the area, country, they're called the chelas. So they clean their horses or clean their homes. And if they happen to produce a girl, they almost immediately kill it. But if in any case the girl is saved, even after poisoning it, then what they do is they basically consider it a gift from God, and these girls are then again given away as mistresses to their daughters' marriages. So this is pretty much the condition there. So Rudalis have been a result of a caste-oriented society. We living in urban areas are barely aware of this Varna system. We think it's a thing of the past. But unfortunately, rural India is quite dominated by this system, and it still plagues its everyday lives. And the few women who are bullied by these upper caste men continue to, and it's a vicious circle. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse from them. Their economic circumstances are such that they're not able to. So in a way, when I write this book, I was, although I was nostalgic about these professions, I was saddened by the fact that these professions will have to go away. But I'm glad they are, because they are meant to be relegated to obscurity. The fact is that we cannot revive cassettes in the time of iPods, can we?
Thank you very much. Very nice.
Yeah. Shunali, the next question's for you. This is pretty much the last round, and then we'll open the questions for the audience. Hopefully there's some questions from the audience. So, let's see. I think, are they attending the Ruskin Bond session there? Anyways, so, Shunali, the book that Shunali has written is a beautiful, light, easy read, which left a huge impact on me. I often think about the book when my baby is kicking in my tummy here, or, when I think about what's going to happen, once it's out. But often this book is dismissed as an airport fiction, which it's a term which has emerged these days, something which is light and easy to read. Ek din mein pad lenge, kaam khatam ho jayega. But it's often dismissed as a chicklet and an airport fiction. Are you okay with that terminology?
So recently I was called to a Lit Fest where I was asked to participate in a panel that was going to speak about the role of women in literature. And even though I was a guest, I went there and I said, I have a problem with this topic. Why can't we have a panel on the role of men in literature? I mean, women have made a very generous contribution, and you have Sylvia Plath, and you have the Bronte sisters, and you have Jane Austen, and you can go on, and Ayn Rand and everybody, and why should we really be the others, Simone de Beauvoir says that, men like us to be the others. And therefore, a man will never have to say that after you became a father, how did you write this book? Because traditional roles have changed now, and there is a certain sense of, a perceived sense of equality in urban India at least. And in urban India, you're having these kind of panels, and you're calling books chicklet. So, fortunately for me, nobody in any of the reviews or the Lit Fest I've spoken at have called it chicklet. I have been told it's breezy, it's a quick read, it's an easy read. And it hasn't been called an airport book yet, at least. But I know what your question is and where you're coming from. So here's the thing, when I read Catcher in the Rye, which I'm sure most of us in this place have read it, the first time I read it, I thought it was just a ha-ha, hee-hee fun book. And then I was older and I understood it was about depression and loneliness and teenage angst and all those kind of issues. it was a thin book, and actually at that time I thought it was an airport book too. Not that I'm trying to compare the two. I'm just trying to say that I think it's the mindset. And it's something you have to live with, but this whole chicklit genre, it is a little annoying. And even male authors, and I said this in my last session as well here, that when you interact with male authors, they kind of are a little dismissive of women authors. So it's all about them and their work. And they'll say, so what have you written? And before you can tell them, they come back to my book. Okay, and because I used to be a journalist years ago, a lot of my friends are very successful published authors today. So you feel that iniquity there too. You feel that they think, oh, she must have written some chicklet. And so it's not worth talking about. But the fact is that Bridget Jones's Diary. Now, I can't read tripe, and I can't read poorly written prose. And I think at least certain amongst us enjoy a lot of poorly written but beautifully told stories, but I have a problem with language not being sort of in form. But Bridget Jones's Diary is among my top 10 favorite books in the world, okay, because it just was funny and without trying to be very serious or very literary, but it is one of those books that meant something to me and a whole generation of women in our lives. Now, it is chicklet actually. It is chicklet. But does that mean that it didn't mean anything to me? No. So as long as it is speaking to a certain audience and doing something for them, it's all right.
Commendable, commendable.
So the last question, and this is a very important question for people who are trying to get published. So my question to you is, how did you, when you started to write your book, and when you knew that you have to travel around the world and sit in the libraries in England and in the US and in France to do your research and produce this kind of, well, seminal work, because this will generate a lot of other kind of books of this genre now, I imagine. You didn't have a publisher when you started writing. So what did you have in your mind, and how did you think that you could go on inspiring yourself for those 10 years of research followed by 4 years of writing, and then how did you finally land an international publisher, no less?
I must say, it took me another 3 years to find a publisher. Because I completed the book in 2007, and I went to a lot of publishers over here, including Penguin and Rupa and Jaico. And they said, Brigadier, you write very well, but ये आपने जो buffers के बारे में लिखा है, ये तेलका के बारे में लिखा है, ये चारा घोटाला के बारे में लिखा है, इसको तो निकाल दो. मैंने कहा क्यों? अरे हम तो फंस जाएंगे. ऐसे बाबा ये भी तो हिस्ट्री है. If you don't learn from history, what do you learn? So they said, sorry, no, I didn't know what to do. I belong to a regiment called Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, and every 4 years we have a reunion. So in 2010, I went to Jabalpur, which I had commanded earlier, and there was a reunion of old officers meeting and JCOs and so on and so forth. It was a 4-day affair. So one British gentleman had come from London. And he had written a book about his grandfather. And his grandfather had served in the Maharaja's regiment in the First World War. So I asked him, I said, Baba, you've written about our history, our historical, what you call battalion and so on and so forth. Can you help me? He said, well, what happened? I said, I've written a book, but nobody wants to publish it. So he gave me the manuscript. So I took the manuscript, he went to England, and he found a publisher. The publisher came back to me. The first book covered the period 1890 to 1990 in Jallianwala Bagh. Okay. And the book is called Nothing But, and subtitle is The Awakening, when we got awakened to get our independence. And a lot of British history in that. So the book is very good, we'd like to publish this, and we'll wait and see about the other books, how this one does, then we'll publish. So at that time I was over 70 years old, so I said, by the time you publish my last book, I'll be up there. So you have the right to publish the first one, and I will have the right to give it to others in case they want it. So they said, fine. So we published the first one, it came out on November 30th, 2013. My publisher name is, name is what? I just forgot. No, I can't. One thing. No, what I forget the name of the guy. Yeah. So Olympia Publishers, Olympia from London. So in 2013, it was 30th November, the first book came out, and we were having gathering of old officers in the NDA, all our classmates. You know what they told me? अरे साला तूने जरूर किसी से लिखाया होगा. Because I was very poor in studies in India and I didn't know maths and science. Okay, so I said, okay, you pay for the other books. So all of my coursemate, one became a general of the army, Padmanabhan, one became an Air Force chief. I had the first book launching at Chandigarh, and when some of them actually read it, they said, "Hats off to you." I said, "Thank God, I'm nothing else to do but to write now. Besides that, I only do babysitting." Okay, other books. Yeah. So, you know, in this world of publishing, no one does anything free. Okay. So the Americans came to know, and they have an eye on what's being published all over the world. So when they saw that this book is coming out and so they came back to me and said, "I believe Brigadier got 5 more books." I said, "Yes, I got 5 more books." But I said, "Okay, we'll publish it for you." So I had only one condition, that I want the book published in 1 year, because this book is going to be out in November. So I want in 1 year that the book, so that the series everybody knows there's the continuity. So he said, "Why do you want 1 year? We'll do it in 6 months." So they did it in 6 months, and by the time it came to April 2014, all my books were out on all worldwide websites. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Flipkart, whatever. But the books are very costly. Yeah, it was randomized, Penguin and Partridge. They combined together and they published it. But the problem is the books are very costly. In America, where the book costs $35, $40, that's too much for us. For them, it's $40. So this book is not meant for individuals, it's meant for libraries, institutions. Because I want people to read, to come to know. I'm not interested in selling it. It's available in Kindle also, so you can buy it on Kindle. It's much cheaper that way. That's how I got my books published. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good job. A round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen. So, before we... Oh, yeah, sure.
A round of applause for her, because I really came to know what India is about thanks to Nidhi. And of course, to her too, and from both of us, because she has been inspiration to us. And when I first saw her in Bombay, I met her for the first time, and she looked at me and said, 6 books? So I said, okay, I'll send you excerpts from it. So I sent the excerpt, and then she came back to me and said, and she's called me a genius yesterday. I said, come on, stop making a fool of me.
His book is a ready reckoner of anything that's happened in our country over all those years. And you've missed finer details of the ordnance scam and the Bofors scam and God knows what else. So it's better than turning to Wikipedia as to turn to his book. So I think we can wrap up now.
Yeah, let's wrap up the session now. Any questions from the audience? Sure. The gentleman in the sweater, please.
Yeah, thanks.
Would you like one of our mics?
I have a question for the Brigadier. When he started writing the book and knew that it would be 3,500 pages or above 3,000 pages, and there would not be one volume, it would be several volumes, and it would be very difficult to make it a popular book so that everybody could afford it or read it. Not everybody, whoever was the reading circle there. Why did he not condense it to let's say 600, 700, 800 pages in one volume so that that would be accessible to all of us?
I agree with you, Shobha. I agree with you. That was a mistake. But to condense so much of it in one book was difficult, number one. Secondly, I felt that if I have really got to tell the story of what's happening in the whole century of 100 odd years, it's difficult to put it in 8 families in just one book. What you said is correct. So what I'm now trying to do is, I'm trying to sell my book to any of these epic guys who keep on television say, make a serial please. Make a serial of it.
No, but seriously speaking, I mean, some of the incidents that you've related or referred to in our discussions also are not known to most people. So if you could choose some of the excerpts from the books and not view it from an angle of
I got your point.
Bengali
that's
Muslim,
a good idea,
Bengali
You can condense
Hindu,
it.
Kashmiri, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah,
yeah.
whatever. You gave your own factual history. You see, that would be very interesting because some of the things that you've written in your book are really unique. And you won't find it anywhere else.
Thank you.
So I think that is something that you should do it for the next, how many years? I don't know.
Sorry.
Okay.
Actually, Brigadier, I'd like to answer that question for you. There are two kinds of books. You know, there is one book which is meant for a brief, succinct read, which you can finish in a couple of months, savor it, enjoy it. There's another book which is a scholarly, erudite version of a book, which gives a lot more detailing than this book would. And what it becomes is an academic reference for the future generations to come. You know, so it's very important to, you know, have both kinds of books available in the market, you know. So his work is perhaps a piece of scholarly work which can be researched upon later for smaller and briefer and, you know, the books which will be coming in the future generation. But this work also was very essential to form a part of libraries and catalogs and, you know, part of a university studying as well. So it's important to have both kinds of literature going at the same time.
Yeah, but with...
maybe the Brigadier can take your question in the author's lounge after this.
Okay.
So can we have any other question meanwhile from the audience? That's about it. Lovely.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. This was a lovely session.